your punctuality. This session will be conducted in English, in French, and Spanish. The language I'm speaking right now is South London. There is no interpretation for South London. I apologize for that. But we will also be doing international sign interpretation, which you will see just to one side on the stage. I will encourage you to turn your smart devices to vibrate or to silent, but use the hashtag EDD17, and maybe if your comments are insightful, they may well end up in today's ceremony. My name is Femi Oke. I am the least important person you will hear from today. I will be your mistress of ceremonies for the next 2 hours. As we're going to be spending 2 hours together, I feel we should be better acquainted. Please turn to your right and shake the hand of the person on your right. Your Majesty, you're exempt. Please turn to your left and shake the hand of the person on your left. Excellent. Such a friendly opening ceremony. During EDD, during European Development Days, this is the focal point for more than 120 sessions, 7,000 participants, global leaders, and heads of state. You will hear from them today, some of them in today's opening ceremony. We are going to officially launch European Development Days 2017. Commissioner for International Cooperation and Development, Nevin Mimisa. The podium.
Very good morning, Your Majesty, honorable presidents, excellencies, distinguished guests, friends and colleagues. I have the great honor and privilege to welcome you all to this 11th edition of the European Development Days. Let me thank in particular the very honorable guests from partner countries or international organizations who accepted to join us and will speak this morning. For those of you who have attended the European Development Days over the years, you will have seen this event grow from strength to strength, evolving each year into the true Davos for development that you will see, hear, and experience over the next 2 days. For those of you we are welcoming for the first time, you are now part of a community which represents the very best and brightest global thinking in development arena. Community is at the heart of everything the European Development Days represent. And we want to be a community, not just in words, but also in action. This is why 80% of our program is designed by you, our development partners. Young and not so young, male and female, global leaders and entrepreneurs from all walks of the life and corners of the globe, we come together at this special event to listen, to learn, to inspire, and to be inspired. I'm particularly proud to welcome again this year 16 extraordinary young leaders who are armed with outstanding ideas and initiatives and who inject a fresh perspective into our discussions. This year, we will have over 7,000 participants and the highest ever number of senior level representatives, possibly the highest concentration of creativity and competence per square meter of any global conference of this kind. I do hope that when you leave here tomorrow afternoon, you will continue to carry the spirit of the development days in your heart and to send a message loud and clear that our global community is committed to investing in development, Thank you very much, and I look forward to a successful 11th edition of the European Development Days. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Your Excellencies and distinguished speakers, let me give you a little tour of the stage. This is very important. The podium where the magic happens. Just in your sight line, to your right, is a clock. There will be a green number 5. That's 5 minutes. That green number 5 will count down to 0. What happens at 0? Well, at 0 is when you will wrap up your beautiful remarks and then say thank you very much, and there will be roarous applause, and you will take your seats again. If you go a little bit over, because this is a very warm audience, I totally understand, but then the countdown clock will start to go orange. When it begins to go red, you will see me appear elegantly to the side of the stage. And then when it goes super red, I will very gently interject, ask you to sum up your remarks, and thank you very much indeed. I have every confidence that I will not have to appear on the stage and interject, because I know that this will be a competition for the briefest, most impactful, inspiring speeches. But I just wanted to give you that little tour so that you're aware of the rules of engagement. And now I can say bonjour to the President of the Republic of Guinea and Chairperson of the African Union, His Excellency Alpha Conde.
Excellences, Mesdames, Messieurs les chefs.
Excellencies, heads of state and government, dear colleagues, dear friends, first of all, I would like to extend my thanks to President Jean-Claude Juncker for having organized, for having invited, ensure that Africa would be here. It's important for Africa and Europe to work together in future. And so we are going to write the future history of our joint relations. Terrorism is, of course, a major problem for all. We want a peaceful world for our children. And this is why we're looking at the consequences of climate change. The world needs to remain united and meet its commitments under the Paris Agreement. We need to create a force to face the challenges, and I can assure you that we are aware of the challenges we face. Africa and Europe have a joint history, and we're learning from our mistakes in the past so they don't happen again. Africa needs to take its fate into its own hands and speak with one voice on the international stage. Africa has the highest demographic population in the world and will reach 1/4 of the world population by 2050. And this will represent a strength for the future. Ladies and gentlemen, under the development agenda, Africa is working together. We will develop education for our girls and agricultural policy to ensure food security. We'll develop railways, energy, so that people will have access to energy. And it's we want to ensure that our citizens have good quality lives. We will ensure our sovereignty is respected so that we can build a future without interference from outside forces. This will create jobs in future while developing the economy. Africa will work in a partnership with Europe, which will help promote our economy and will benefit both Europe and Africa. So there will be a massive development in energy mix with our own resources. And this is why I'm sure that the necessary indebtedness for such an energy project will be taken into account. A European fund worth 40 million euro is covering the risk for investment in by the private sector in Africa. There is a very high level of unemployment in Africa. This is something that needs to be tackled. We must admit that this is a new form of slavery. The African Union owes its existence to the fact that it has been so effective in protecting the most vulnerable. So this is what's most important in a partnership. Everyone has to do their share. We want to ensure that the European development policy will help ensure relations between the European Union and Africa will be as fruitful as possible. We will come up with a joint charter for the future of our youth and our young people. We need to ensure that we can build the Africa of tomorrow. Our generations, our youth have shown that they are willing and able to build the Africa of tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Merci. Très bien. Oh, what a great start. We might finish early. His Excellency Paul Kagame is the President of the Republic of Rwanda. Good morning, sir.
Your Majesty, Excellencies, distinguished leaders, partners, I thank the leaders of the European Union who invited us to this important event. I would like to fully associate with the themes selected as priorities for our partnership, namely private sector development, gender equality, and youth empowerment. At root, these goals are tied together by one simple and powerful idea, and that is unleashing all the potential in society in order to build a more equitable and prosperous future for all of us. The energy and dynamism of young people drives innovation, which is why in Rwanda we invest heavily in technology, in particular ICTs and connectivity. A vibrant private sector creates opportunity and well-being that government alone cannot deliver, which is why we continue to work to make Rwanda one of the easiest places in the world to do business. And it is impossible to imagine a pathway to prosperity where the rights and talents of women are not given their full place. This is the reason Rwanda not only passed laws mandating gender equality in land and inheritance rights and political representation, to mention a few, but also continually to change popular mindsets. The European Union has been a very good partner in these efforts, and the support, I can say, has been put to good use in Rwanda and is greatly appreciated. We commend Europe's recognition that economic and social development is a joint enterprise that benefits all of us. Allow me to close with a word about values. Sustainable development rests on a foundation of good politics and respect for rights. While people may draw different lessons from their respective histories about the most suitable form of governance for their situation, there will always be ample room for discussion and exchange of views among friends. In that context, the topic of migration commands our attention, and rightly so. Our starting point should be that the dignity and safety of migrants, both in their country of origin and destination, is paramount. Yet, one can safely say, if very uncomfortably, that the migration crisis is a consequence of policies that have not worked well for a long time, if at all. Compromising stability by seeking to impose one's values on others will always have adverse outcomes for everyone involved. This is what needs to be addressed urgently. If we have an honest and objective discussion, we find that there is actually no basis for Africa and Europe to see in each other any threat. There is a better conversation to be had for both Europeans and Africans. Today, a decision to leave one's country usually partly starts with a sense that one's potential cannot be fulfilled at home. We can do better. There are responsibilities and opportunities for all of us working together. We must persist in our joint efforts to strengthen the promise and potential of the private sector, women and youth, in creating stable and prosperous nations. I look forward to the productive discussions and to working more closely and meaningfully together in the years ahead. I thank you for your kind attention.
And thank you, Mr. President. Buenos dias. To the President of the Plurinational State of Bolivia, His Excellency Evo Morales.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, and greetings from our authorities to Belgium. And I'd like to greet all of the authorities of the European Union. It's a great honor for me to be present at the European Development Days. I feel that it is important. It's an important space to share our experiences from a political, economic, and social points of view, so that we can work together. We can cooperate and to serve our people. I would like to make the most of this opportunity because it's important for the indigenous people. You are, of course, aware of our struggle to share our Mother Earth. We need to live in harmony with Mother Earth and living well. This is the only way in which the plurinational state of Bolivia can ensure development, because, of course, Mother Earth can exist without human race, but the human race cannot live without Mother Earth. And so, with a great deal of commitment, we are raising our voices at international levels so that we can deal with issues such as climate change. Now, of course, the agreement isn't perfect, but it's the result of a global effort to protect our planet and save it for future generations. And so, we deplore the fact that some states prioritize multinational interests, multinational corporation interests, and they ignore the environmental aspects. On the Bolivian model, since 2006, our country has experienced an improvement in the people's life conditions for our citizens. The results of the model in Bolivia are self-explanatory. We've seen great increase in growth in 2009, 2014, 15, and 16. In spite of low prices of Bolivian exports, we've had great growth. And we've even gone beyond the projections of the IMF and other organizations. And in 2017, Bolivia will be the leader of economic growth in our region. Brothers and sisters, you know that we're facing major challenges. In February 1979, there was an invasion which meant that Bolivia lost its access to the sea. But a number of associations have ensured that have recognized that Bolivia is suffering from economic disadvantages. For example, our country loses out on 2% of growth per year, and this means that in 2016 we had 4% growth, but if we had access to the sea, we would have had growth of 6% GDP. Social work is very important, and the European Union is very informed of this. It's important to ensure that we focus on political, social, and economic. Bolivia moved from a colonial state to a plurinational state, and I've seen from participating in the UN Security Council just how diverse the world can be. I dream in having a plurinational society in the world where we would all have the same rights, especially the most abandoned, the most vulnerable, so that our rights will be respected. In the economic aspect, we nationalized a number of companies, public enterprises. And so I would now like to say that before, the situation was different, but now these companies are serving their societies. And from the social point of view, what's most important is redistribution of wealth to balance out inequalities. Now, wealth shouldn't be concentrated in a few people's hands. It belongs to the people. We are looking at industrialization and these economic resources which are now in the hands of Bolivians, but this was not the case before. Companies sent the wealth back home. For example, we had telecommunications. Intel, for example, it was in the hands of Italians. My apologies to my Italian colleagues, but all of this money was leaving our country. But when we nationalized, $140 million are now coming to us. And this money is going to our municipalities, to our local communities, to our Bolivian citizens. So these economic resources are serving for payments for pensions in Bolivia. So the point I'm making, brothers and sisters, is quite clear. We need to have social inclusion. And I would just like to conclude by saying that I very much appreciate the opportunity to speak about migratory policy. In some countries, these policies have become more stringent. There are an increasing number of restrictions. And so Bolivia would urge countries to ratify the Convention on Workers' Rights. We should live in an inclusive space for reflection where that we can overcome physical walls, invisible legal walls, and overcome discrimination and racism, so that we can ensure a paradigm shift which is appropriate for our society, and we can have proposals which will help overcome these walls. And so we can have a people's action plan to move forward in future. And so the government of the plurinational state of Bolivia is calling for a world without walls, towards a universal society. And on the 20th and 21st of June, Congress will take place in Bolivia to which we will invite people. And I must say that it's an honor to share my experiences with you. You know where I'm from. We're very encouraged by the results we've had in such a short span of time. We've reduced poverty by 38% in 10 years. When I got to power, we had international reserves worth $1 billion. Now it's worth $15 billion. In 2005, our GDP was $9 billion, and we've now reached $36 billion. So those are the results of our social challenge through recuperating and nationalizing many companies. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, Mr. President. If you've just joined us, if you're watching outside of this room or around the world, this is the opening ceremony of European Development Days 2017. The President of the Republic of Senegal, His Excellency Macky Sall.
Majesté,
Your Majesty, Prime Minister of Belgium, dear colleagues, heads of state and government, Commissioner for Development, ladies and gentlemen commissioners, dear friends. At this very auspicious moment, I would like to remind you that we have strong ties of trust between Senegal and the European Union because we share values of freedom, democracy, and respect for human rights. And it is these uniting values which have been so sorely tested by unprecedented terrorist attacks within Europe. And so my thoughts go out to the victims of those terrible attacks. I think of their friends and families and express my compassion and sympathy to them. As the human race, we have no choice but to continue and try to combat this terrible scourge. The International Forum on Peace and Security in Dakar made this a priority. We've been working on this together for 4 years. And the 4th edition will take place in November. Dear friends, when we think about investment and development for the greater good and in the interests of peace and prosperity, it's clear that this 11th edition of the European Development Days is placing the future of humanity at the very heart of this debate. We need to show solidarity, and we have strong partnerships already to ensure that. Africa has strong ties with Europe, and Senegal has its own plans for development in this field, together with the support of the European Union. I won't go into our own plans in too great detail, but we are still pursuing thorough reforms of the economy, trying to invest more and invest better in education and to promote social inclusion. The third pillar of our plan is pursuing public policies which will promote peace and security in our countries and to ensure good governance. The 3rd year after implementation of our plan, we have already seen very promising results. Our efforts focus on continuing modernization of our agriculture, and we have recorded record unprecedented levels of production. We have also invested in managing water resources, land management, and agricultural production methods. We still have a great deal of work left to do in order to face the challenge of climate change. Senegal is absolutely committed to the entirety of the Paris Accord for climate change. And during the COP21, we want to find a sustainable agreement because we will be on the front line in terms of climate change and pollution. We have numerous African representatives here. On behalf of all of the heads of state and government, I would like to just reiterate that Africa supports the Paris Agreement, particularly supporting the Green Fund, not just for adapting to climate change, but tackling it as well. With your permission, I would just like to talk about the relationship between Africa and the European Union. At the opportunity of the 11th contract we have signed with the European Union allows us to focus on democratic governance and improving water management, amongst others. We are convinced that we will be able to improve life in our regions, ensuring access to electricity, water, and making sure that women have access to work, for example, making sure that no one is cut off. We have promising programs which will help our youth in rural areas, making sure that they do not take the great risk of illegal migration. The existing programs between Europe and Africa must continue, ladies and gentlemen. After the difficult negotiations on the partnership agreements, we now have a strong partnership in a world which is tested by uncertainty. But this gives us a great opportunity, ladies and gentlemen. We will be able to continue work, and we hope that we will continue to pursue this strong partnership, which is mutually beneficial to both sides and which is built on respect of our diversity. A partnership which goes beyond aid for development, but which will promote innovative mechanisms to promote investment. Africa needs $68 million for investment in the continent, and we are convinced that this can be achieved through our partnerships. I would call upon our European partners to mobilize development funding to this end. We need the tools to continue improving. We want to improve our transport links in ports by rail, because we know that a poor Africa would be a factor of instability, but a wealthy, prosperous Africa will be a strong partner in the world. Let us learn the lessons from the past, from excellent partnership, and continue building on our partnership to build an ambitious future for shared wealth for all. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur President. The themes for EDD 2017 all begin with P: investment in peace, in the planet, in people, prosperity, and partnerships. So when I introduce the next president, listen for the P in his name, because he's fitting in very nicely to the theme of our gathering. His Excellency Arthur Peter Mutharika, the President of the Republic of Malawi. Mr. President, you are very welcome.
Your Majesty, Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, every time we gather on the European soil to think about development, there are realities that we should never miss. For the last 150 years, Africa has always been viewed from a negative point of view. Our reality is that Africa is not a poor continent. What you need is a skilled labor force to turn our assets into capital. Although its people are mostly poor, Africa has a lot of resources. Sadly, however, part of African poverty is created by global structural imbalances. Today, I want to address the question of investing in the human capital. I want to address the situation of the youth and the women in Africa and the rest of the developing world. The case of Africa is very telling. It is important for us to invest in the human capital because much of the African situation results from lack of skills and the way we think. The sub-Saharan Africa, where I come from, receives about $134 billion each year in loans and development aid. But $102 billion is taken out of African region through tax evasion, illegal transfers, flight of jobs profits, and expenses resulting from climate change. This is unacceptable. The problem is that aid is not a bad thing. We're not out to demonize financial aid. We know that the Europe we see today and admire today is also a consequence of financial aid delivered under the Marshall Plan. So it means we can have better aid which will support our trade and sustainable development. And we thank European institutions for providing more than 32% of all official aid to Africa, with Malawi getting about 32% of the European support. Today, our vast world has shrunk into a small global community. This means the world will continue to share fortunes and challenges, because the global human ecosystem is more integrated under globalization more than ever before. Yes, the challenges facing Africa are bound to haunt Europe sooner than later. The fortunes of Africa are bound to benefit Europe and the people and vice versa. Poverty and unemployment in Africa will become a migration problem in Europe. This is a problem every European leader has to contend with. While you worry about migration, Africa is worried about youth unemployment. And here is the correlation. Age is one of the factors that influences migration. Except where the conflict, it is the youth who often are driven by the desire to find a better place for themselves somewhere else in the world. Thus, both African and European leaders hold responsibilities to create conditions to encourage economic growth and development in Africa and the world. An economically strong Africa stands to benefit both African and European people. In the case of Malawi, we have now set the stage for country to grow. But we need the kind of economic growth in which everyone grows, particularly youth and women. Investing in women and youth is necessary for inclusive development. As a country, we're ensuring that our vulnerable people, youth and women, are part of the development agenda. We have enacted and enforced various legislations to safeguard against issues that affect women and children. These legislations are to safeguard poverty rights and equality, curbing human trafficking, prevention of domestic violence, and prevention of early marriages. I can now say, well, we have a progressive legislative framework for protecting and empowering women and children. We have intentional programs such as women's social and economic empowerment, increased access and quality education for girls, and social cash transfer programs. Above all, we have taken proactive measures to include women in strategic decision-making positions, such as Clerk of Parliament, Solicitor General, Ombudsman, and Chairperson of the Malawi Electoral Commission. For the first time in the history of Malawi, the majority of members of this important Electoral Commission are women. We also are working on a program whereby in the coming election 2019, we'll reserve one seat in each of the 28 districts in which only women will compete. Just like women, we also need to invest in the youth as human capital. As a father leader and a global champion for the youth and global champion for women, he for she, I'm not just concerned with the plight of the youth and women in the development world. Africa and Asia have the youngest population. In Africa, about 60% of the population is under the age of 35. This number is forecast to grow to alarming proportions by 2030. Given the problem of migration, Europe is bound to share the consequences of this challenge. Therefore, we need to focus on investing in the youth as a human capital. We need skills that enable them to become productive members of their societies. This means we also need a paradigm shift in the education system in most parts of the developing world. We can no longer educate the youth with a mindset to be employed by someone. Let me share with a story I've told Malawians many times. This is a story of three people. Their names were everyone, someone, and no one. Everyone wanted someone to employ them. Everyone forgot that there's no one called someone. In the end, no one employed everyone. To avoid this scenario, in this story, we have a country engaged in a comprehensive skills development program. We are building community technical colleges across the country in order to equip the youth with employable and employing skills. This is also one way of creating a skilled labor force that must support the investors who are flocking to Malawi. This is why I want to see Africa and the rest of the developing world engage in this effort. Unless we deal with the employment problem of the youth, some problems of the developing world will continue to haunt Europe. This task is our mutual responsibility. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was here in 2006 for the very first European Development Days. It's a little different. It evolves from year to year. But the one thing that I think remains true of this forum is its accessibility, how easy it is to be here, to be with global leaders, to be with people who are important in terms of development. There was one time I remember in 2008 when a particular person heard while he was in Paris that European Development Days was happening. So he flew to EDD without a registration, without a ticket, and asked to be let in. Security was a little concerned and said, there's this guy called Richard Branson who wants to come in. It was in 2008, and it was when he was hoping to meet some of the heads of state who are here. Now, I do recommend you do get your ticket to come to European Development Days, but it does give you a sense of how important this forum is to meet and to have bilaterals and to have communications with people from all over the world. The President of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana is next on stage. His Excellency, David Granger.
Thank you, Your Majesty. Your Excellencies, heads of state and government, ladies and gentlemen, the Cooperative Republic of Guyana and the Caribbean community record their gratitude to President Jean-Claude Juncker for his kind invitation to me as President of Guyana and Chairman of the Caribbean community to participate in this important event. Guyana and the Caribbean welcome this event as having the potential to consolidate the international consensus achieved with the signing of 3 transformative international agreements in 2015, the Addis Ababa Action Agenda of the 3rd International Conference on Financing for Development, the Paris Agreement on Climate Change, and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. These agreements attest to the international community's resolve to confront transnational threats through international cooperation. Your Excellencies, for us, the environment is a major concern. Climate change is a single global threat which endangers us all. Climate change, if left unchecked, can result in a global environmental catastrophe. Extreme weather patterns, rising sea levels, desertification, drought, and increasingly intense and frequent natural disasters have been inflicting human fatalities and costly destruction on developed and developing countries. Climate change, however, has been most severe in small island developing and low-lying coastal states, such as those in the Caribbean. Small states like ours are making a big contribution to arresting climate change. A new model of development, the green model, represents hope for Mother Earth. The green model of development places emphasis on protecting the world's ecosystems, reducing greenhouse gas emissions through renewable energy use, and providing environmental services to the world through avoided deforestation and conservation. I'm very happy to be sitting next to the Honorable Prime Minister of Norway, with whom Guyana has a close bond in this regard. My country, Guyana, is in transition to becoming a green state. We are located at the very center of the Guyana Shield, one of the world's oldest geomorphic regions and one of the richest remaining tracts of virgin rainforests. Guyana has pledged to place an additional 2 million hectares of its territory under conservation. Guyana is protecting the unique biodiversity of the Guyana Shield. It is transitioning towards a goal of 100% renewable energy by 2025 through the generation of biomass, hydro, solar, and wind energy. Green development technologies represent for us a commitment to environmental preservation and protection. Small island developing and low-lying coastal states require significant investment and transfers of technology to implement their green plans. Investment in development must be linked to investment to protect our environment so as to avoid global environmental catastrophe. Investment in the environment means investment in the future, investment in the earth, investment in eternity. There can be nothing more profitable than protecting our common patrimony. Excellencies, Guyana calls on the international community, and particularly the European Commission, to support the structural transformations which are needed to ensure that small island developing states and low-lying coastal states survive the perils of global warming and climate change. I thank you.
I noticed as a former meteorologist that my heart warmed when you applauded comments about climate change. I am wondering who in this room can mention and knows all of the Sustainable Development Goals. There are a couple of people I know who know all of them, and one of them is about to be on stage right now. His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Ghana, is also the co-chair of the Sustainable Development Goals Advocate Group. He can say the SDGs backwards. Should we ask him to do that? Nana Akufo-Addo, welcome.
Your Majesty, Your Excellencies, co-chair and members of the eminent group of advocates of SDGs, ladies and gentlemen, I'm grateful to the organizers of this year's European Days Conference for the invitation and the opportunity to address this gathering on the theme, Making Gender and the Youth the Private Sector's Business. A central objective of this conference has to be to define a strategy to combat global poverty. That too is the goal of the UN 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, i.e. promoting global development that leaves no one behind. I'm honored by the decision of the new United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres to appoint me as co-chair of the UN Sustainable Development Goals Advocates Group of Eminent Personalities, in succession to my predecessor, His Excellency John Dramani Mahama. It is a mark of trust in Ghana's leaders, which honors the Ghanaian people and for which they are grateful. My duty, and that of all the members of the Advocates Group, is to mobilize political support for the realization of these goals. It is worth noting that SDG number 5 talks about achieving gender equality and empowering all women and girls. Another of the SDGs, number 9, also aims at building resilient infrastructure, promoting sustainable industrialization, and fostering innovation. These two goals clearly have specific demographics of our populations in mind, our women and the youth. In Ghana, 51% of our population is female. The last census of our country has it that 73% of our population is below the age of 35. These statistics are also representative of the African condition and mean that the empowerment of our women and youth constitute fundamental challenges for our development. That is the surest way of rooting our poverty and guaranteeing the progress and prosperity of our continent and country. This so-called youth bulge provides immense opportunities for rapid economic development. Ghana's economy, like most of the economies of Africa, has remained structurally rigid since colonialism, depending largely on the exports of primary commodities, such as in the case of Ghana, gold, cocoa, bauxite, and timber. There can be no future prosperity in the short, medium, or long term if we continue to maintain this economic structure. Unless we industrialize with the goal of adding significant value to our primary products, we cannot create the necessary numbers of high-paying jobs that will enhance the living standards of the masses of our country, our women and youth. It is for this reason that my government's priority is to build the most business-friendly and people-friendly economy in Africa, which will create jobs and prosperity for Ghanaians. And this we intend to do through private sector empowerment. Over the last 5 months, the length of stay of my government in office, we have introduced measures to stimulate the private sector through the introduction of a monetary policy that will stabilize the currency and reduce significantly the cost of borrowing, in addition to a raft of tax cuts to bring relief and to encourage businesses. These interventions will shift the focus of Ghana's economy from taxation to production, and hopefully will make Ghanaian businesses very competitive in West Africa, Africa, and beyond. It is the competitiveness of our enterprises in the agricultural and manufacturing sectors that will determine our capacity to create wealth for our youth and women and wealth in our society. The competitiveness of Ghana's private sector is key to addressing issues of inclusion, economic development, and growth of Ghana. That is the only way we can build a Ghana beyond aid. That is, freeing our people from a mindset of dependence, aid, charity, and handouts, and building a self-reliant economy which will mobilize the immense resources of Ghana, material and human, with women and youth in the forefront to resolve Ghana's problems. Whilst we empower the private sector to create jobs and wealth, my government, recognizing the benefits of the digital revolution, has instituted measures to keep the youth in touch with global trends and also equip them with the skills which, together with their sense of enterprise and innovation, will be necessary in Ghana's economic transformation. That is the focus of my government. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, I believe this summit should afford participants an opportunity to share ideas and create also a platform for deliberation on the development of solutions to private sector and enterprise development in the world. Further, it should be a platform for limitless thinking and an environment for strong network building. Its outcome should be to define concrete strategies for making gender and the youth the private sector's business. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I counted SDG number 5 and SDG number 9. Thank you very much for that. I'm just looking to see how people are reacting to our opening ceremony of European Development Days and what people are latching onto as they're watching from outside of this room. President Mutharika stresses the need for collaboration between Europe and the developing world. And from the President of Ghana, who you just heard, my priority is to build the most business-friendly country possible, the comments that are resonating in this room and beyond. The Prime Minister of Norway, please join us on stage. She's also the co-chair of the UN Secretary-General's Advocacy Group for the Sustainable Development Goals, Her Excellency Erna Solberg.
Thank you. Your Majesties, heads of state and government, President, leaders of EU institutions, Excellencies, and of course, ladies and gentlemen. As co-chair of the UN Secretary-General's Group of SDG Advocates, I am grateful for the European Commission to organize the European Development Days and for inviting the SDG advocates. And it is very inspiring to be here among so many people who are devoted to what I see as the most important issue in the world, namely our common campaign to eradicate poverty while protecting our planet's environment and climate. The Universal Sustainable Development Goals, adopted by 193 heads of state and government in 2015, will guide our efforts. There will be still need for traditional aid and humanitarian assistance in the world to reach out to marginalized and conflict-ridden areas of the world. There will be need for support to children who need education in a conflict. There will be need for food support. There will be need for conflict resolution. There's a lot to do in different areas. But the SDGs, however, takes a holistic view of global development and integrate economic, social, and environmental factors. So the 2030 agenda is truly transformational. And I would like to say it's transformational on two issues. The one is that it links social and environmental issues together. There is no future where you can think you can keep your jobs and don't care about the climate. It won't function, even if somebody believes it. But it's true, you cannot reach climate goals unless you create jobs at the same time. If you can't give hope to young people, if you can't make sure that their life will be better than ours, which I think should be every politician's main view, to create a society that is better for your children than the ones that you were given by your parents. But there's not possible not to link job creation, social development, and the climate together. So the 2030 agenda is transformational. It's also transformational because it makes clear that all countries of the world, both the rich and the poor alike, have to work to do at their own national level. Whether we are representing the government of Norway or Niger, or organizations as diverse as the European Union and Amnesty International, we can and must be part of an SDG campaign. Similarly, if we represent big companies like Unilever, or the local grocery shop, universities like the London School of Economics, or a rural primary school, We can and must be part of the SDG campaign. Some of the SDG 17 goals makes it very clear that from the perspective of the SDG framework, we are all developing countries. And that's also transformational in the types of discussion that we have had, which have separated the world between the developed and the not so developed. We are now all, maybe on different stages, but we are all developing countries. Let me take SDG 5, for example, gender equality. Until we actually meet the targets for gender equality in all areas of society, we all have work to do at the national level. This includes rich and highly developed countries, such as my own country, Norway. Gender equality is a human right. I believe that should be enough as an argument for why we should work on it. But if that is not sufficient, but to convince leaders I meet, I also remind them of the immense positive effect that increased gender equality has on a country's economic growth. You just can't lose out on all the talent that women have to give to your countries. SDG 8 on decent work is another example on how the SDG apply throughout the world. Youth unemployment is a universal challenge. It's affecting rich and poor countries alike. It fuels extremism and it fuels the hopeless into a more or less dynamic situation. About 40 million new jobs have to be created every year just to keep up with the growing numbers of people of working age worldwide. Good governance and the rule of law are basic preconditions for all investors, public as well as private. So governments and other stakeholders in all countries now need to think innovatively about how to stimulate job creation, because we have a responsibility to give the next generation hope for a better future. And moreover, there are a host of threats to the common good that put all countries on the same boat. Preventing and combating climate change, epidemics, violent extremism, armed conflicts require more global cooperation, not less. And the consequences of not acting together to solve these global ills will harm us all, no matter where we live on the planet. So during the European Development Days, several SDG advocates will take part in discussion and offer nuanced perspectives on what it will take to achieve the SDGs. We all agree that hard work on all the 17 goals will be needed. It will include efforts to promote quality education for all, good health, gender equality, decent jobs, climate action, peace, justice, and good governance at all levels. And to the young people present here today, my message is, you are the ones that can make poverty history. And I often find it that if there's something important to be said, Nelson Mandela has said it better. So let me thereby end by quoting him. Sometimes it falls upon a generation to be great, and you can be the great generation. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Prime Minister of the happiest place in the world. You should spend some time with her. Maybe it might rub off. Thinking of happy, how are you right now? Are you okay? You've been sitting for quite some time. You good? Okay, excellent. This is the program for this year's European Development Days. Now, I'm not supposed to have favorites, and I don't. I recommend you go to all 120 plus sessions. It is not actually physically possible, but I'm going to point out one that's in A2 at 1600 hours today. So that's 4 p.m. today, just next door. Fostering inclusive growth and tackling inequality. You may well be getting a little taste of what may be in that panel with one of the panelists, Madam Christine Lagarde, the Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund.
Merci beaucoup, Madame.
Thank you very much. Your Majesties.
His Highness and friends, and everybody else for that matter, it's a great pleasure to be here this morning with you. It's been 2 years if I recall, when the Sustainable Development Goals were flavor of the day, the only thing that one would talk about. Now, thank goodness, because of this development forum, because of you all, we are again talking about it and putting it center stage of our discussions. And given this discipline that was demonstrated by all the leaders that have preceded me, I have no doubt that they will take it to heart to actually deliver on the Sustainable Development Goals. And certainly at the International Monetary Fund, we want to help in that respect. You might be a bit concerned that I will not be disciplined. I was actually given a teeny tiny little bit more time in order to allow for a future speaker to arrive. So if I exceed the 5 minutes, please do not complain, madam. Thank you. Now, I could have talked to you about many things this morning by way of introduction. I could have talked about domestic revenue mobilization. I could have talked about debt sustainability. I could have talked about the macroeconomic framework, which is so important in order to make sure that investors feel comfortable and the cost of financing is reasonable. I could have talked about tax issues and the fact that you should not provide too many exemptions. You should not leave too many little loopholes for one or the other investor, but rather offer a very predictable and stable framework. But I want to talk about one thing, which I very strongly believe in, and which is absolutely critical to reduce inequality, to foster growth, and to provide for diversified economies, particularly for those of you who are relying heavily on commodities. And by that, I want to talk about something that all of you have mentioned, almost without exception, but which I'm going to challenge you on, and that is the woman empowerment. Yes, that's a good idea. Now, why do I want to talk about that? Because I'm a woman? Yes, of course. Because it's a moral issue? Yes. But I'm here as head of the International Monetary Fund. And I'm here to tell you that it is macroeconomically relevant. I'm here to tell you that it will boost growth. I'm here to tell you that it will diversify the economy. And I'm here to tell you that it will reduce inequality. Let me just give you a few of those examples using some numbers, because it is a triple macroeconomic bonus. It boosts growth. In low-income countries, reducing gender inequality by only 10 percentage points could boost growth by 2 percentage points over the next 5 years. I know many of you African leaders have already great growth, 6, 6.5, 7, 7.5, 8% for some of you. Adding another 2% makes a big difference when it comes to electrification, when it comes to major investments. Second, it tackles income inequality. Moving from perfect gender inequality to perfect gender equality could reduce income inequality overall by 10 Gini points. I know you can calculate inequality in many different ways, but Gini is the most commonly accepted. You can reduce it by 10 percentage points, 10 points. Third, it supports economic diversification. Increasing gender inequality can lift a country from the lowest to the average rank for export diversification purposes. And as we know, it's much better off, you are much better off having an export diversified economy rather than to rely on one single source of commodity, be it a strong one with a good price. So the macroeconomic case for women is obvious. You've heard the story before. Well, how is it then that in 90% of the 160 countries that we have surveyed, together with the World Bank, 90%, 9-0, there is at least one piece of legislation, either in the Constitution or in the body of laws, that actually discriminates amongst women? So for those of you who actually mean what they say when they talk about empowerment of women, please look into our study or look into your constitutional and legal framework and identify whether or not there is a barrier, there is a hurdle, be it ownership of land, be it appearing in court, be it having access to finance that actually prevents women from accomplishing what they can do, which is just terrific. As Nobel laureate Amartya Sen astutely noted, gender inequality is not one problem, It is a collection of problems. And it certainly starts, for those countries, many here, that respect the rule of law, it starts with the rules that you apply. Now, let me just address 3 challenges which come on the top of that legal level playing field that you should have. One is financial inclusion. The gap between men and women is 6% globally. But if you look down in certain areas, it's much more than that. I did not focus on Africa on purpose. Southeast Asia, for instance, has a 17% gap between man and woman when it comes to financial inclusion. Widening access to finance, again, I'm quoting IMF research paper, for both men and women can boost economic growth by 2 to 3 percentage points in those countries where financial inclusion is low. Now, we tried to do a little bit more in-depth research to see exactly in disaggregated terms between genders what was the financial access. And we found, much to our dismay, much to our surprise, that actually in those 28 countries, very often data was missing. So in order to identify whether men or women have access to finance, it's actually extremely difficult. So we are developing, with the help of the European Union, and through its funding as well, including from that of the Netherlands in particular, we are trying to actually identify the numbers and the data that will help us actually address that question. Second challenge, which you have mentioned very much so, is education. And education for the girls is going to make a much bigger difference than education in general, simply because of the gap that there is between boys and girls in that respect. There are countries such as Bangladesh, such as Cambodia, I think one was mentioned also today, where public cash transfers will be conditional on sending not children, sending daughters to school. And it makes a big difference in terms of subsequent output, in terms of time of marriage, in terms of number of children. Third challenge, infrastructure. Well, why would I talk about infrastructure in relation to women? Because depending on how you conduct the project is going to make a difference for a woman. If you think about additional transportation, great. But you should look into actually how the program is designed, how the transportation will be installed, and what kind of security will be assured for women who suffer violence invariably in public transportation that is not well thought through. The same goes for sanitation. The same goes for many of the infrastructure projects that are financed and that need to be financed. Now, what does the IMF do in that respect? We help, you know us through various activities that we have, whether it is surveillance, whether it is capacity development. But we try to streamline the analytical work that we do to identify what societies actually do for women. We do that in our normal surveillance work. We do that in programs as well. And to give you the example of transportation, in the latest program that Egypt has signed up for its own society, with our support, they have precisely identified 3 things: childcare, parental leave, and transportation that is actually supportive of the fight against violence. Second area, and then I will stop because I think I will have abused my time sufficiently. I'm turning to you, madam, but you're not listening to me, so never mind, I will carry on. We are supporting, so second element, which is very specific, gender-responsive budgeting. What is gender budgeting? For those of you who don't know about it, it's actually the analysis of a budget with a special focus on the output and what it delivers, what it does for women and women empowerment. And it doesn't only analyze it, it also provides the recalibrating that is needed in order to make sure that women are actually on the map, right and center. So I would like to thank the European Commission, which has helped us, particularly in operationalizing this work. I would like to thank the United Nations, with which we are doing a lot of work in terms of gender budgeting, specifically because it's what we can do. The UN, of course, does a lot more than that. And I would like to just quote, by way of conclusion, Amartya Sen again, who says, "Progress is more plausibly judged by the reduction of deprivation than by the further enrichment of the opulent." So with that as a basis, please let's encourage the women as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madame Lagarde. There was a response to what you've been saying. I've been following this online and in the room, and Professor Jeffrey Sachs says, well, everybody is right, what you've been talking about, but we need to create a natural framework for this to happen in. So this has turned into a dialogue as well as a presentation and opening ceremony, which is really in the spirit of European Development Days. The Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations is Amina J. Mohammed. Amina, you're very welcome.
Your Majesty, distinguished heads of state and government, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's a real honor to join you here at the European Development Days, and this is Europe's leading forum on development since 2006. And as I sat in the audience listening to all the heads of state come up and speak, I was looking at this backdrop and trying to find where the gender was. And as of coincidence, there is an acronym there, EDD17. And for we women, that's an expected date of delivery. And the coincidence, of course, is that I will have my first grandchild in 17. So I do have 1st of July in 2017, a granddaughter. And that means an awful lot for 2030. We are 2 years since the adoption of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and it was a long journey, 4 years, and many of you in this room today were part of that journey. And so now we've got past the talk and the signing of resolutions. The Sustainable Development Goals become the rallying point for the action on a range of issues, from poverty to inequality that we've heard, and to the special plight of countries facing fragility, conflict, and humanitarian emergencies. And while I'm very happy that Femi didn't say to me 1 to 17, what are they? What I will say is that they are a collection of imperatives, and they are indivisible. And if we look at the first 6, they talk about the unfinished business of the MDGs, and that is absolutely critical to what's happening in Africa today. But equally important is the second 6. And that second 6 is really about where the investments need to be made, because that's where economies will grow and they will have the revenues to do the first 6. But that needs a lot of financing. It also needs goals 13, 14, and 15 to be considered, because unless we take care of the environment, then certainly there won't be the implementation of 2030. But all those 15 goals stand on 2 pillars. And those are the ones I believe the EDD really will should take consideration of in this next couple of days. That is, first and foremost, how do you invest in the intangible? What is not a priority for many because they have so many choiceless choices. Investing in institutions, strong institutions. Developed countries made those investments, and they can deliver to their populations, and they continue to improve, and it, of course, continues to be a developing issue. But for countries that are fragile, countries that have not yet grown, weak institutions are the last place we go to. And so this goal is important if you want rule of law, if we want to see sustainability, and if we want to see no one left behind. And goal 17 is about partnerships, but let's put genuine in front of it, because it has to be partnerships that deliver. They deliver on time, they deliver at scale, and for years, and I mean the last 5 in particular, we've been hearing about billions to trillions. And what we need to do is find the keys that will unlock that. Not that we can see it and talk about it and not touch it, but how do you unlock those trillions for the countries that need them today to grow those second 6 goals? European leaders, we know, continue to demonstrate strong commitment by aligning the work of the European Union with the 2030 Agenda. And I'd like to express my deep appreciation for the efforts of our SDG advocates, many of whom are in this room, led by Prime Minister Erna Solberg of Norway, who, by the way, is incredibly passionate about education and has been long before she became one of our advocates, and President Akufo-Addo of Ghana. Thank you for taking up the invitation to join as the SDG co-lead. Your Majesty, we also appreciate your role as an advocate of the SDGs. And I think one of the issues that you put on the forefront has been the issue of mental health. And it is one of those issues that we don't often talk about in public. But today, with the different kinds of conflicts that we have, women and girls are coming back damaged, and we don't have the skills nor the understanding of how to grapple with that. They're not coming in hundreds, they're coming in thousands, and we need to have that front and center, and so we thank you for putting that on the agenda. Looking ahead, I see 4 key priorities. First is strengthening the bonds of solidarity. Young people facing appalling high levels of unemployment, with implications for our common future, including security. Refugees experiencing harrowing journeys out of conflict and persecution, and along with migrants, face discrimination in places that should be havens. We need to do more to provide protection and opportunities while addressing, most importantly, the root causes. Second, intensifying our efforts to empower women and girls. There is no inequality more pervasive and universal than gender inequality. I welcome the announcement last month here of the Gender Initiative in Brussels that the European Union and the United Nations will forge a strategic partnership to take equality and empowerment of gender much further. Let us make this a great success, including the elimination of all forms of violence against women and girls. Third, increasing development financing. A difficult global environment continues to leave major gaps. It is crucial for countries to meet their commitments on official development assistance and to target ODA more effectively for sustainable development. But public finance alone, we know, will not suffice. We are talking about trillions. And so we need to leverage public spending, on the one hand, to generate private investment, but on the other hand, we will need to forge partnerships with the private sector that will unleash new financing and promote the dissemination of essential technology. Fourth, and this is the one that we're all talking about lately, pressing ahead with climate action. I don't think it's necessary today that we focus on the decision by someone to withdraw from the Paris Agreement. To the Secretary General and myself, the next step is very clear. We press on, we accelerate our actions, we ramp up the ambitions. But we are also clear that we should not let the global consensus unravel any further. We need to find an effective solution that ensures the participation of all countries in managing the dangers of climate change to each and every one of us. The Secretary General and myself will leave no stone unturned in our conversations with the relevant parties, including someone. Together, we believe we can go much further. The Secretary General has set out a strategic vision for determining climate action a few days ago, and we remain convinced that actions against climate change offer opportunities to create sustainable jobs, to build new markets, to improve health, and steer the world onto a safer, more sustainable path. The 2019 Climate Summit that we propose in New York will be an important moment, but of course that's more than 2 years away, and we need action now. Europe was instrumental in making the Paris Agreement possible, and the world counts on you now, along with other major powers, to keep the ambition high. We have the milestones of COP22 and 23, and we will produce a roadmap that ensures that we keep the momentum and all stakeholders on board the sustainability train. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, on European Development Days, we recognize the remarkable achievements of Europe at home and around the world. Europe is admired globally for its high standards of living and for the multilateral cooperation that has advanced peace for decades. Today, there are strong synergies between the Sustainable Development Goals and the European Union's priorities for sustainable development. And like the United Nations, you are focused on people, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnerships. But there is still much to be done within Europe, and that leadership needs to come from you, starting from the inside out. And in that spirit, the United Nations welcomes today's signing of the new European Consensus for Development. Let us join forces to build a future which has dignity for all and in which really no one is left behind. I thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations. This is just not one ceremony. There is a ceremony within a ceremony. It's like a little surprise, building something inside something else. We are going to rearrange the furniture on the stage, so we're going to do that now. Gentlemen, you can come and do that now. This gives you 1 or 2 minutes for a pause, but I am going to say, pause in your seat. Stretch your legs in your seat. Do not get up. I'm showing leadership qualities right now. Gentlemen, come on stage. Let's move this furniture around, and then we'll be back for the ceremony within the ceremony in about 2 minutes' time. As you can see, we have totally transformed the stage for the second ceremony. Federica Mogherini, please join us at the podium. Federica Mogherini, Vice President, High Representative of the Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy. And for the next 15 minutes, my co-host. So nice to be working with you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's great to see you all today. With some of you, we were in Monrovia just Sunday at the ECOWAS Summit. And it is a pride for me, an honor, to present today with the EU institutions, all of them, European Parliament, the Commission, the Council of Ministers, the Member States, the new European Consensus on Development. And let me tell you that with this, we enter into a completely new era of our cooperation policy, our development policy. This is not the first time the European institutions agree on a consensus on development, but compared to the previous one, in 2006, this new document marks a completely radical change. First of all, for the first time ever, this is a policy not only for the EU institutions, but for the EU institutions and the member states together, jointly. And together we are by far the largest global donor, the indispensable partner for our friends across the globe, and for a rules-based global order, the multilateral system Amina was just reminding how important and valuable it is today. If we invest our resources towards the same goals, our joint potential is massive and unparalleled. And this is precisely the aim of this consensus. Second, this new consensus synchronizes our policies to the Sustainable Development Goals. Agenda 2030 has been agreed by the whole world, North and South, East and West, big economies and developing countries. Together we have agreed to focus on reducing inequalities, on good jobs for our youth, on gender equality, on a development model that respects our environment, and also on the practical ways on how to achieve this. And the consensus commits to defining a specific set of priorities with each of our partners. So we don't only focus on what we can do for our partners, but with our partners together, building alliances globally. Third, we recognize that public spending is essential, but never sufficient. Think of the Africa's youth. We will have to create millions of new jobs every year to make sure that the young people of Africa can find opportunities in their homeland. And to do so, we need to get private firms on board, providing them with an incentive to create jobs in fragile contexts and to invest in accordance with the SDGs. And this is the logic behind our external investment plan. We provide incentives and guarantees to private actors so that they can invest safely in fragile areas and in coherence with the SDGs. Last but not least, we believe that every investment in human development is an investment in our collective security. I was just in the press room in the Commission today presenting our work on the European Union Defense and Security Package, and I've spelled out very clearly also there, for us, investing in climate change actions, in human development, in humanitarian actions, in development is also a direct investment in European security. This is the European way to security, always an integrated approach. So let me conclude by saying, before I invite the leaders of our institutions here on stage, I was in the last 7 days traveling from Latin America to West Africa, and I have seen a world that wants a strong global European Union as a partner that is reliable and committed. I believe today we send a reassuring message. The European Union is there, tomorrow even more than before, in partnership, building strong alliances to support the multilateral system and support a sustainable way of developing our planet. I thank you very much, and I start with inviting the representatives of the 3 European institutions and the member states who will sign together with myself the new European consensus. And first, our host, Jean-Claude Juncker, President of the European Commission. Jean-Claude, you have the floor.
Majesté.
Your Majesty, it's a great honor for us to have you here today, showing the interest that the Royal Court has always had in Africa. Your Excellencies, heads of state and government.
Last Sunday, good news. Madame la Directrice.
Director General, dear Christine, I'm delighted, ladies and gentlemen, to be speaking to you today. Not just because I've been invited to speak to you at length, but because I get to speak about something that I really, truly care about. Europe being able to make a contribution to its interests around the world. We are being asked to take on more responsibility and to promote those interests and values which we share. The European Union truly believes in the importance of human dignity, and that is something that we should defend everywhere, not just in Europe, by fighting for peace and prosperity for all. We cannot afford to neglect those who have invested their hopes in the European dream. And we know that this is a dangerous temptation for some. The temptation to simply look inwards. We cannot ignore the plight of those living in poverty, which we have not yet eradicated. It is unacceptable that every 6 seconds a child dies of hunger in the world. It's unacceptable that in developing countries, 66 million children are hungry, go to bed hungry every day. In a continent, Africa, that is so very close to us, it's an honor for me to welcome Louis Michel, MEP and former Foreign Minister for Belgium and Commissioner. And I know that his words on Africa have always inspired me and the whole Commission. We have to tackle head-on the challenges that we're facing to make sure that those living in misery can find help. This is a mammoth task, and only universal cooperation will allow us to overcome these challenges. Efficient multilateralism has to be the vehicle for our action, and that is the spirit of the 2030 agenda. We, within the European Union and member states, use this as an opportunity to set our new ambitious goals for sustainable development. We're all in the same boat. It's not just developed and less developed countries. There cannot be differences made between those who give and those who receive. Between Africa, Bolivia, and Europe, we have a relationship of equals based on dignity. It's not because people are not European that we would choose to look down on anyone in any way. This is a partnership of equals. And when facing challenges like climate change and migration, it's clear that these are shared challenges that affect us all to the same extent. In 2016, 100 million people across the world are living in insecurity, when it was only 20 million in 2015. And this steep rise is a result of conflicts, climate change, and other threats which we face. We have seen tragedies forcing millions of people to flee to neighbouring countries or elsewhere. Without a serious effort to fight against climate change, which causes these droughts, more people could be thrown into extreme poverty by 2030. We could have more than 250 million people affected by 2050. And sea levels are also rising, which means that people's homes could disappear. The future of humanity is at stake, ladies and gentlemen. We need to take action together. We need to have the resources to achieve our goals. By 2030, we need to invest $5 billion per year to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And that would be, the current level is less than 3% of that sum. The European Union is committed to achieving this goal and will remain to be so. Of course, we all want to show solidarity and make a contribution to international aid. If we did that, we could cover 1/15 of everyone's needs. We need to include investors as well, private sector, and we need to mobilize national resources and promote good governance and fiscal justice. That is why the Commission set up an African investment fund for neighbouring countries, and we hope it will be operational by September. The plan and fund aim to stimulate growth in countries where it's almost 3 times as expensive to set up a company than any other continent. We need to enable access to the labour market. It's our responsibility to give people here a better future, giving them a chance and opportunities which will allow them a future rather than risking their lives. This is a key European project which will mobilize everybody, particularly young people. We need to set ambitious goals to ensure a better future for everybody, particularly the most vulnerable. And I will do everything I can to make sure that Europe meets the expectations and hopes of those who have put their trust in us. Thank you, Your Excellencies, Your Majesty.
Merci Jean-Claude. J'invite maintenant le
Thank you, Jean-Claude. I now invite Mr. Tajani to join us on stage. And thanking Antonio, I'd like to thank all of the MEPs for the work that they have put into this consensus. Antonio, you have the floor.
Majesté, c'est un grand plaisir pour moi de vous voir.
Majesty, thank you very much for having invited me here today to the European Development Days. Thank you to the Commission. It's a very important issue. It shows our commitment in Africa and throughout the world. Dear Jean-Claude,
very good results. You are another time Prime Minister of your country. Good luck. Cara Federica, cara Alto Rappresentante, ladies and gentlemen, I am very happy to be here today with you to sign the new European Consensus on Development. 11 years after the last signature, we find ourselves with an update and holistic document that reflects our collective vision to tackle today's challenges. For the first time, a shared framework applies to all EU institutions and member states, providing a common approach. I want to thank the Maltese presidency for the work carried out to reach an agreement for the European Development Days. Thank you very, very much. This sends a strong message to our partners and to the world on our commitment to development and to the United Nations 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. I also want to thank the two co-rapporteurs of the European Parliament, Bogdan Wenta and Norbert Neuser, as well as the chair of the Development Committee, Linda McAvan, and the entire negotiating team for their excellent work. Mais je veux aussi remercier mon ami.
I would also like to thank my friend Louis Michel. We worked together in the European Commission. And we have always shared the same vision for Africa. And so I would like to thank him for his commitment, because he's turned to Africa, not looking at them with European vision, but with an African vision. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for your work. We need to move forward. We need to continue. I am Italian. I'm from the south of Italy. And so Africa is very close to me, closer to me than to others, and we understand what needs to be done to work well alongside you.
Our main goals remain to eradicate poverty and achieve sustainable development. At the same time, this new consensus continues to promote our common values of respect for human rights, fundamental freedoms, peace, democracy, good governance, gender equality, solidarity, and justice. However, our world is changing. This is why we need to review and adapt our approach to development. We need to better link development with peace and security, with migration, with environment and climate. We need to ensure effectiveness and greater impact. While maintaining traditional development aid, we also need to include and increase the participation of the private sector via public-private partnerships, via new and innovative tools such as EU trust funds and blending. In view of the most recent terrorist attack that struck once more Europe, I want to stress the importance of the development and security nexus. These attacks do not affect only Europe. They happen every day in Africa, the Middle East, today in Iran, and Asia, Oceania too. If we are serious about development, we need to be serious about stability and security. The same goes for climate change. If we want to be serious about development, we need to be serious with the fight against climate change. I can tell you that Europe will stick to its commitment under the Paris Agreement. Climate change and security make me want to say a few words about Africa. This continent will be a priority of my mandate of President of the European Parliament. I'm strongly in favor of better dialogue and stronger engagement with our African partners. Africa, despite the challenges it faces, is a continent of opportunity and growth, and we need to offer concrete possibilities to the youth and entrepreneurs. our focus in Africa is sincere, and the next week, after having received the chairperson of the African Union Commission, the European Parliament will host in Strasbourg the President of Ivory Coast, Alassane Ouattara. To conclude, I want to remind you of how crucial this consensus is to reach the Sustainable Development Goals. This is the message I will cover this afternoon to the SDG advocates who will be in the European Parliament. But before my conclusion, I want to send another message. Me gusta también hablar con los latinoamericanos.
I would like to send a message to our friends in Latin America, because for us, Latin America is also very important. We mustn't forget our brothers and sisters in Latin America. We share the same values and we can work alongside them. We've heard from Evo Morales, and we will see what we can achieve together in order to help Latin America. We can work alongside Latin Americans. Thank you.
Grazie, Antonio. Also, thank you for reminding all of us that we're not talking only about Africa, we're talking about Latin America, we're talking about the Pacific, we're talking about so many areas of the world. Now I turn to, last but not least, the Prime Minister of Malta that just recently was re-elected wonderfully in his new role on behalf of the Council of Ministers and Member States. And I would like to use this opportunity through him to thank all the Member States, all the Ministers of Development, of Foreign Affairs, in particular the still current Foreign Minister of Malta, George, that helped us a lot to achieve consensus and exercise wonderful Mediterranean mediation skills in building consensus. And I would like to spend one last word on one prejudice we always have. We always refer to Europe as the North and Africa as the South. Well, currently, the presidency of the European Union is in a place that is south of some of the Northern African countries. Malta is south of Tunisia, if I'm not wrong, and south of a few other Northern African capitals. This to say that sometimes we perceive ourselves in roles that bind us to a little bit limited approaches. And when we see where reality is, like Malta offers us the opportunity to do, we realize that what we need is really moving from the typical development cooperation approach to what we're doing today with the consensus, which is building true partnerships. So now I turn the floor to Joseph Muscat, and congratulations again.
So I think what needed to be said has been said. Majesty, first of all. What needed to be said has been said. Many things need to be done now. May I bring to your attention just a couple of facts. The first is that we're using the word consensus, and believe you me, within the intricacies of our wonderful European project, achieving consensus is not the simplest of things. Nevertheless, I do believe that the fact that all institutions and all member states have agreed on what is arguably a very ambitious agenda on development and development aid speaks volumes on the way in which Europe is positioning itself and in the way in which Europe sees itself and its role within the world. I disagree with those who say that Europe can be a world leader. Europe is a world leader, and I do believe that today this is a vivid demonstration of what Europe can achieve. What Europe can achieve in a non-prescriptive manner. Most of the policies that are being suggested in this consensus are policies that apply for us. This is not something that we're telling others to do. These are things that we should do ourselves and that we're doing ourselves, sometimes struggling in doing so. So we do appreciate the fact that this agenda is an ambitious agenda, and it's an agenda which we should do all together. Thank you to the Commission, thank you to Parliament, thank you to the fellow member states.
Thank you, Joseph. If you can stay with me, I would invite Antonio Jean-Claude to join us for the signature of the consensus and to make it officially now our new consensus on development. Not finished yet, because we have a consensus. Now it's a matter of implementation, so the work starts now. And I continue to believe that we will have the same consensus also on the implementation. I will invite the President of the European Investment Bank, Werner Hoyer, to now come on stage and publicly sign the European Investment Bank Declaration of Support to this consensus. We count on the bank to help us implementing the policies we are going to implement from tomorrow onwards. I got the prize, I got the bank signature. I thank you all very much, and now it's my pleasure to give this role back to the one that wonderfully plays this for the European Development Days, but thanking all of you, because the result of what we have achieved today is a collective effort inside the European Union, but also together with our partners, including all the friends I see here today. We count on our common work as of today to continue working for our planet. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Mogherini. Thank you very much. And so, Your Majesty, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, EDD delegates inside the room, outside the room, viewers watching around the world, I have to say that you are clearly, definitely the best audience I have worked with all day. I wish you a very successful and productive European Development 2 Days 2017. My name is Femi Oke. It has been my great pleasure to be your Mistress of Ceremonies. Good afternoon.